Where's Melanie?
Well, that's what I wanted to tell you. She was being a pain. She made me late for the pickup because she locked herself in your bathroom for hours with her bong getting high. She was nagging and complaining. She wouldn't shut up.
So you left her back there?
Not exactly. I shot her.
You shot Melanie?
Well, life is full of misery and loneliness and suffering. Sometimes you just gotta shoot a bitch.
Is she dead?
Listen, there are worse things in life than death. Have you ever heard Bob Dylan sing?
Is she dead? Yes or no?
Let me put it this way. She's cut down on her expenses. You think she's skinny now? Just give it a weekend and she'll really have shed the pounds.
You couldn't just talk to her?
Talk to her. I'm talking to a woman who thinks yoga is a female version of yogurt. Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at old wigs and ass. Does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romacka. And today we're discussing Jackie Brown from 1997 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at ttswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and on our YouTube channel. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/ttswpod. And one more thing, we have a guest. You might have seen him in The Marvelous Miss Maisel. You might have seen him doing warm-up for The Daily Show, or saw him on the news as advocating and then suddenly getting a street named after George Carlin, a street 10 minutes from Joe's house. Please welcome Kevin Bartini.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on.
Hey man, how's it going?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be a part of this. It was an excuse to rewatch one of my favorite movies last night, so put me in a good mood.
That seems to be the reason most people want to guest on this show, is an excuse to watch a movie.
Yeah. I watch so many without a reason. It's just good once in a while. It takes that laziness feeling away for a moment,
Is this your favorite Tarantino movie?
No, I don't think I could say that. It's the one I think that's grown on me the most. That I have I definitely have more of affection for it now than I did when it first came out. It's the one I think has really aged like wine.
Okay.
Tarantino also said that this is a movie that gets better every time you watch it.
Yeah, he's right. I think it had to do, my opinion with it originally was it was the third film, right? It came after Pulp Fiction.
It's definitely after Pulp Fiction. I don't know if it's the third, but yeah.
I think it was Reservoir Dogs, then Pulp Fiction, then Jackie Brown, as I recall. Yeah, because it came out in 97. And I think at the time, and when you watch it, and I was thinking last night, it really didn't have those explosive moments of violence or, the cartoonish thing, somebody's head just blows up in the back of a car kind of thing out of nowhere, that maybe those first couple of movies had, and it was more character driven with a great payoff at the end. And so I think when I first saw it, I thought it was a bit too slow for what I'd been expecting, but the more I see it, the more I really love it.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever seen a Pam Grier picture before?
Yeah, I had, because, and that was only because of Reservoir Dogs. I remember that's where I first heard of her, right? They referenced her in that movie. Lee Marvin was another reference from that movie who I had to go back and kind of look up and watch a little bit. Unfortunately, I grew up working in a video store back in the 90s, so I had access to a lot of stuff. So yeah, I've seen a couple of the Foxy Brown and some of the blaxploitation films of the genre. Certainly since then, before going into it, I don't know that I'd seen maybe just one of her movies.
Okay.
Cool beans.
Yeah.
All right. Joe, take us back to 1997.
I saw somewhere that the main theme of Jackie Brown is aging, and on reflection, I guess that's true because at different times in the film, characters lament on where life has taken them. Or in the case of Samuel Jackson, he's disappointed in what time has done to Robert De Niro's character. He himself seems unaware that he might be past his prime.
What with that wispy-ass hair and that frickin' braided garbage hanging off of his chin.
Now, this isn't an original theme, of course. The Wild Bunch is all about aging criminals, and I've already done a history corner on aging in general. I've also done more than a few on crime. So, with that in mind, I'm going to focus on a story from 1997 that we've never mentioned before on the show. As usual, the publication I reference will be from the region in which the movie is set. In this case, as this is an LA-based movie, I plucked a story reported in a California newspaper. With all that out of the way, let's get into the story of James Ware. This is from the Santa Clara Valley Signal. Headline, George.
Judge acknowledges lie, withdraws Clinton nomination.
Justice James Ware was a judge on the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. In 1997, President Clinton nominated him for a seat on the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. He probably would have gotten the gig were it not for one problem. Now today, you see what kind of people you have on the bench. Think frat boy Brett Kavanaugh. And it's difficult to believe that this would sink anybody, but it did. James Ware got in trouble and had to withdraw from consideration because he lied about being James Ware. That is to say, he lied about being that James Ware. In 1963, a 13-year-old black boy named Virgil Ware was shot by white teenagers in Alabama. This happened on the same day as a 16th Street Baptist church bombing by the Ku Klux Klan that killed 4 little black girls. Judge Ware had told audiences for years that Virgil was his brother, and it was true that Virgil Ware had a brother named James, but in 1997, James Ware was living in Alabama and working for a power company. He was not a federal judge in California.
For the record, this guy is black, right?
Everybody's black here, yeah. Except the Klan and Clinton, of course.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't put it past like George Santos to lie and say, or, Ted Cruz to lie and say that they were actually black.
Well, that's not the case here. When his Honorable Justice story was first reported and stuff about him being the brother of Virgil Ware, the father of both Virgil and the actual James Ware, contacted the Alabama courts to complain that this man was exploiting his family's tragedy. Bad enough his son was murdered, but the white boys who did it only got 7 months in jail and 2 years probation. So I'm guessing the father was already no fan of our criminal justice system.
You'd think.
You think? In any case, once the truth was known, Judge James withdrew his nomination and got an ethics violation rap against him, but he remained on the bench until his retirement in 2012. I will now quote from the article. I did live in Birmingham at the time of the event, the judge said Thursday. My father had told me he had a son about my age with another woman whose name was James. At one time, he told me she had another child named Verge. He told me that we were related to other Wares in Birmingham. I did suffer the death of a sister by shooting at about this same time. I used my tenuous connection with the Wares and my own feeling of loss as a basis for making a speech about Virgil Ware's death. End quote.
Boo!
My question here is, if what he's quoted as saying is true, why not talk about his sister? He could have mentioned Virgil Ware without suggesting that they were related.
Well, this is easy, Joe, because what he's quoted as saying is not true. He's lying. He's making up bullshit to justify his lying. That's what it is.
What do you think is the lie there?
Joe, you wrote this section. You know what the lie was.
What? No. His quote, he's saying why he said what he said. I'm saying
why he said what he said is just him rationalizing, trying to capitalize on that tragedy.
Okay, what about you, Kevin? What do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a very weird. My father had another son and blah blah blah. But the adding the thing about his sister, and I think maybe to answer your question why he didn't bring up the sister was because I guess for the time. The murder of that other boy, James Ware, the young man, 13-year-old kid.
Virgil.
Sorry, yeah. Was had more headlines and whatnot. He said his sister, death of his sister by shooting. That doesn't mean it was a racially motivated shooting. Could have been a hunting accident.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like superfluous info. So if two things were equal, if she was shot outside of a church or something like that, or in maybe that's why, you know what I mean? But it wasn't I'm guessing it wasn't as sensational a shooting, unfortunately, for the woman who died as well. That would be my guess, but it just also seems like he was a guy who's pretty full of shit. Thought he had a little, it was like he had a lie that was helping him get elected judge or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And it was a good backstory. And then finally, he got to a level where maybe he never thought he would be on the path to the federal bench. But then when you get to somewhere where your story actually gets checked out by people and you're caught, then you have to spin a bunch of plates and hopefully somebody believes something that you say. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable. I mean, it just seems rather just dumb. And like, why? Yeah. He screwed himself over for presumably a position he would have loved, being a federal judge. Again, he could bring up the boy who died. I mean, yeah. as a guy who grew up in Alabama at the time, it's not like it didn't really happen.
Right.
Why just say we were related? But, George, we actually know someone who he would go around and introduce. He stopped doing it, but he would introduce himself because he had like a famous last name, and he introduced himself as someone who was related to that person. So it's just something people do.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. And the other thing to remember is this happened decades before the internet, where people were able to think they could get away with making up a past or a relationship because it would have been so much harder to prove. Where today, a quick Google search can call out things, too.
This was 1997 when this happened.
When this controversy happened.
So when he started, it was... Yeah, never mind.
But the lie that he told was decades early.
Yeah, was decades before.
Right. And even still, 1997, that's the year I graduated high school. I didn't get an email address till 98, so the internet was still in its infancy back at that time, too.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I was... trying to have cybersex in chat rooms on AOL around 1996.
Yeah.
And we both know you were chatting up dudes, only didn't know it.
Well, we don't know that then, do we?
I can pretty much guarantee that
look, the probability is high. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying we can't know for sure.
Right.
And look, I really don't care. If I help somebody get off, then cool.
All right. George, tell us about Jackie Brown.
Okay, this was written and directed by good old Quentin Tarantino, who for the show we've seen Pulp Fiction and Sin City. And this is based on the novel Rum Punch by Elmore Leonard.
Quentin Tarantino has also directed Reservoir Dogs, both Kill Bills, Sin City, Grindhouse, Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. As for Elmore Leonard, I've read a couple of Elmore Leonard novels, and I remember none of them except to say they were pretty bad. Think of his books, at least the ones I read, as casting notes between covers. Writing would be like this. Sam, who looked like Al Pacino, picked up the gun and pointed at Rich, who was a Ron Howard type.
Basically, he was trying to summarize movies that would be made from his books the way that I end up summarizing them.
But not even so much summarize, it was like... he wrote characters and he would say the characters look like a Hollywood star, clearly trying to get them, like if the book is ever made into a movie, they'll cast that person. I'm reading this and it just blew my mind. This is in a book. If I was this editor, I would have just crossed that out. Like, what are you doing? Have you ever read Elmore Leonard? Either of you?
No.
I have. And I like, also how so many of his paragraphs begin with phrases like, the camera pans left to find. No, he did. Yeah, I mean, Elmore Leonard, nobody was ever going to confuse with Shakespeare. He was what he was, which was dime store fiction, basically, Pulp Fiction, which Tarantino obviously loved. And he was one of those writers, you would most likely find his books like as you're running to catch a plane. It was like, it was not heavy lifting reading. But the more popular that he seemed to have gotten as far as Hollywood, the more egregious the things you picked up on, I think, seem to have been.
And also his books also just mostly dialogue as well. It's not even like descriptions like I wrote there.
Right.
This movie certainly tracks with that. So for blurbs, IMDb says, a flight attendant with a criminal past gets nabbed by the ATF for smuggling. Under pressure to become an informant against the drug dealer she works for, she must find a way to secure her future without getting killed. He's a gun dealer!
Right.
That's true.
Right.
He's not a drug dealer. He's a gun dealer.
Right. The drugs she was caught with were incidental. She didn't even know they were in there. It was all about the money for the guns.
No.
Yeah. Amazon says writer and director Quentin I hate it when they start with writer and director Quentin Tarantino adapts Elmore Leonard's bestseller Rum Punch in a stylish homage to 1970s exploitation movies with 6 players on the trail of $500,000 in cash. Amazon didn't watch the movie. Amazon read the IMDb stuff and wrote a blurb. So, we open to what amounts to a music video for Bobby Womack and James Lewis Johnson's 1973 struggle song, Across 110th Street, as we watch Jackie Brown wordlessly be moved along a people mover at an unnamed Los Angeles airport.
Across 110th Street actually is also a movie. So, which I think that song's the soundtrack was made for.
Well, it fucking should be. It's perfect. It's a good song, too.
It is very good.
Yeah.
We got to hear plenty of it in this film. She's a flight attendant for Cabales Airlines, a shuttle plane between Cabo San Lucas and L.A. She gets to the gate and starts greeting passengers before the movie completely forgets she exists for a while.
She does sort of drop out of the picture there for a bit.
Yep. Jackie Brown is played by Pam Grier,
whom I've seen in Mars Attacks, Posse, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey,
Yep.
Friday Forster, Sheba Baby, Foxy Brown, Scream Bacula Scream, Coffee, Black Mama, White Mama, and Women in Chains. You know, if they remade that movie, they could, your mother's passed and mine's not well, but if they were younger, your mom and my mom could be in that, George. Black Mama, White Mama.
Sure. Speaking of mamas, apropos of nothing, here's an incomplete list of things I've heard people call other people's mothers in movies. An aardvark, a hamster, and a snowblower. That's Labyrinth, Monty Python and Holy Grail, and Short Circuit.
Okay.
Now we're in a living room with Ordell Robbie, Louis Gara, and Melanie. Before I describe the scene, I'll say something about the way the film is structured. Tarantino describes this as a hangout movie. He means that the audience hangs out with the characters for a while. While it can add depth to them, it also doesn't move the plot along. That's why this movie is 2.5 hours long.
When I rewatched it, it just did not feel that long. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hard-pressed to think of where I would really tighten it. You know, if it is 2.5 hours, it does breeze along pretty nice. It's got a good pace.
Yeah.
What are we doing while hanging out with them? We are watching Girls Who Love Guns. A bikini-garbed gaggle of gals giving boob-jiggling demonstrations of automatic weapons fire as a sales tactic. Melanie gets high on the couch unless Ordell wants a drink or the phone rings. Ordell narrates the commercials to Louis, mixing in his descriptions and sale figures as a small-time arms dealer. Louis is relatively quiet. Ordell Robbie is played by Samuel L. Jackson, who we've seen for the show in Coming to America, Do the Right Thing, Goodfellas, Jurassic Park, and Pulp Fiction.
And of course, I've seen him in all his MCU appearances.
Yep.
As well as The Hateful Eight, Shaft, the 2000 version. I just realized this when I was looking up his credits. I didn't see there's a 2019 Shaft. So there's literally the original Shaft, the 2000 Shaft, and a 2019 Shaft. Like, there were 3 films out there called Shaft about the same character. I don't know how they did this. I didn't know that was allowed. It's confusing.
I didn't even realize that Shaft was part of the Marvel Universe.
He might as well be. He does become a superhero in the later movies, basically. Bullets can't hit him. He's flying through the air. He's incredible.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to the credits, I've also seen Samuel L. Jackson in Chirac, Kingsman, The Secret Service, Django Unchained, The Other Guys, Inglourious Bastards.
Yep.
He was the narrator. Out of Sight, Eve's Bayou, which you're going to watch in a future episode, True Romance, Amos and Andrew, Jungle Fever, Mo Better Blues, and School Days.
I've also seen him in Star Wars Episodes 1, 2, and 3, Loaded Weapon 1, and Kill Bill Volume 2.
So you've seen a lot of pictures with him with numbers in it for some reason.
Yeah, I was noticing that. Louis Gara is played by Robert De Niro, and I have to say, this is the, just schlubbiest I've ever seen Robert De Niro in a movie.
To that point, absolutely. Yeah. It was a little bit of a letdown, I thought, the first time I saw him.
Really?
Robert De Niro right then was just coming off of Goodfellas only 2 years before. We hadn't gotten to the phase of Robert De Niro where he would just, he'd play a mall Santa in a movie if you gave him the money, where he did so much crap in a row and he was really hot. And it was like, what is he going to do with Tarantino? And then it ended up, the character he played was just such a laid back. He played it brilliantly, but it was so laid back, and you weren't getting that De Niro, that it almost felt like a waste.
Yeah, we got a different De Niro.
Yeah. And so that's one of those things that grows on you the more you watch him.
So for the show, we've seen him in Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas.
And I've seen him in Angel Heart, Meet the Parents,
Yep.
Silver Linings Playbook,
Yep.
The Irishman, Joker, American Hustle, Wag the Dog, Heat, The Untouchables, Brazil, The Kim Comedy, and Greetings. I think was either his first or one of his first films.
And I've seen him in We're No Angels, Men of Honor, and Meet the Fockers.
Was We're No Angels, was that with Sean Penn?
Yeah, they played priests, right?
Yeah.
I think they were pretend priests. I think they were making to be priests.
Yep.
I don't remember seeing it, but I remember the video cassette box. The two of them, yeah.
Two very, very great actors in a very schlocky. I mean, I didn't see it. I shouldn't say that, but from my understanding, this does not stand out in either one of their filmographies.
Right.
And Melanie is played by Bridget Fonda, who we saw for the show in Easy Rider as a child in The Commune.
And I've seen her in It Could Happen to You, The Road to Wellville, Lake Placid,
Yep.
and A Simple Plan. And apparently she's not working anymore, which I didn't even realize.
Yeah, she stopped in 2001 because she married
The composer Danny Elfman.
Yeah,
she married Danny Elfman, had a kid, and stopped acting.
Mm-hmm. And she's, of course, Hollywood royalty in the Fonda family. Her dad's Peter Fonda, her grandfather Henry Fonda, and her aunt is Jane Fonda. So I don't think if she wanted to come back and do something, I don't think it would be too hard for her to get an agent and a couple of auditions,
Oh, not at all. Especially she's married to Danny Elfman, also in the business, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got Simpsons money. She doesn't need to be worrying about it.
Nah.
Melanie answers the phone, and it's for Ordell. So he goes to the kitchen, and she returns to the living room to talk smack about him to Lewis. She sees Ordell as an incompetent fraud with an ego disproportionate to his competence. Lewis tries to remain neutral as he's living by Ordell's graces after doing a stint in prison for bank robbery. Ordell returns to badmouth the customer he was just talking to, using up some of the 38 N-words scripted into this film for Samuel L. Jackson to say, as scripted by Tarantino.
And since you bring it up, I guess I should interject here. Now, as any film fan knows, Tarantino and Spike Lee, there's some tension there. And one of the things that Spike does not like is Tarantino's fondness of the N-word. When Spike pointed out that he seemed to enjoy that word a little too much, Tarantino accused Spike Lee of being the real racist since he wants to stop him from using the N-word. So...
I've heard he had similar conversations with Denzel Washington, too. That's why Denzel's never been in any of his movies.
Oh, really? Denzel? Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, it seems like Tarantino doesn't understand what racism is. I'm just going to throw that out there as a possibility, or a definility.
My own feeling is I prefer, if he's going to write it, I prefer to come out of the characters' mouths who are black rather than his mouth. That was my main objection in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
He's like saying it to Samuel L. Jackson, a hitman, the character is written, if you said that to his face, would freaking shoot you. He would just sit there going, oh
yeah,
sorry, man.
Like, sure, yeah, if you're going to script it, at least have the black characters say it, but at the same time, don't script it. You don't need it. It doesn't add anything to the movie ever.
It's flavorful. It's flavoring. What do you think, Kevin? N-word, in or out?
Yeah,
Let's see if I can ruin your career.
There's times that it's more egregiously used, and then there's times where, Django, for example, it was the word and the parlance of the time, and this and that, and there were, the times in Pulp Fiction where he used it, it was a little more egregious, and in Reservoir Dogs, a couple of times it got, thrown about egregiously. But you could make the argument that those were uncultured characters, and that's how they would speak. And, It's one of those things. It's just, you wince when you hear it, maybe, but I don't know. He's a writer. He gets to write what he wants, and I still watch his movies. So
yeah, I still watch his movies too. But he can write what he wants, and we can respond to it.
Absolutely, of course.
With a podcast.
Or Spike can just tell him to his face, "Fuck off," and doesn't watch it and refuse to work with him.
Yeah, exactly.
Then the phone rings again, and Melanie waits a while to tell Ordell that it's for him, and it's from Beaumont, an employee who's managed to get himself thrown in jail. Ordell drives himself and Lewis over to a bail bondsman, Max Cherry, and uses a lot of words to post $10,000 bail for Beaumont. Cherry is professional about the whole thing, but senses something off with Ordell because he's got good sense. A picture on the wall shows Max's partner in this, Winston. Max Cherry is played by Robert Forster,
whom I've seen in Mulholland Drive, The Descendants, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, and Me, Myself, and Irene.
And Winston is played by Tom Lister Jr., who for the show we've seen in Beverly Hills Cop 2, Friday, Next Friday, and The Fifth Element.
And I've seen him in The Dark Knight.
Yep, and I've also seen him in Little Nicky and Austin Powers and Goldmember. By nighttime, Beaumont Livingston is out of jail, at home, and Ordell goes to visit him. They spend a few minutes catching up, before Ordell plays the "I just did you a $10,000 favor and you owe me one" card. Beaumont Livingston is played by Chris Tucker, and he'll be in this movie for like 5 minutes. For the show, we've seen him in Friday and The Fifth Element.
And I've seen him in Rush Hour and Rush Hour 2.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to see Rush Hour 3. I was really going down in quality. 1 was a delight. 2 was like, and then after I was like, but I'm not going back.
The 3s usually seem to have a tendency to do that.
Yes.
Ordell asks Beaumont to come be his backup for a gun sale. So they get to Ordell's car, and Ordell tells him to get into the trunk so he can pop out with a shotgun later. Beaumont is extremely reluctant, but eventually caves and gets in.
What do you think of these scenes here so far, Kevin? Like, when you can you remember the first time you saw these? Like, were you intrigued, or you're like, why is he getting into a trunk of a car, or what the hell's going on? Did you believe what he was telling them, or do you say, this is obviously a setup?
Did I believe? Yeah, no, I don't know. The first time I saw it, that I believed it was a setup, as just a way to get him in the car. Chris Tucker is such a unique personality. When he came on the scene with Friday and kind of exploded, and he was a great stand-up comic. I just remember being, a little sad that he was only in it for 5 minutes, because he really pops on the screen. He really, and I think I would love to see him and Samuel L. Jackson in their own, those two characters before all of this, a prequel or something.
That would be interesting, yeah.
Or something else, because they just had a really good chemistry, really good back and forth. And we're every moment watching those two guys was so much fun. Loved it.
So Ordell takes a moment to collect himself in the driver's seat. Then he drives around the block into a vacant lot and parks. Goes to the back of his car, opens the trunk, and shoots Beaumont twice, killing him. And Chris Tucker is out of the movie.
Yep.
Yes, out of the movie.
So here's one thing I don't understand, and maybe we'll get to this a little bit later, but they end up saying they found Beaumont in the trunk of a car, right?
Right.
But it seemed, was I wrong, but didn't that just straight up seem like that was Samuel L. Jackson's everyday use car? It didn't seem like, you know what I mean? Like it didn't seem like he had just stolen it or something, or just gotten it. And so didn't they just find the body in his specific car? I didn't understand that. You know what I mean?
You can move a body to another car.
Possibly, and they didn't show it, or I don't know. It just triggered me a little bit.
Like what they probably did is jimmy somebody's trunk open, put the body in that person's trunk, and then close it so that person could find it and call the police.
Maybe that's what they did. Maybe that's one of those scenes that ended up on the editor's floor.
It's just the strange thing to me is that Samuel L. Jackson's character, he seems to want to kill a lot of people a lot of times. You think he'd have a spot specific to high bodies. And he just leaves them willy-nilly for the cops to find.
Right?
Like a pig farm.
Yeah, pig farm something, yeah.
Or I didn't understand why he didn't just dump the body in the parking lot then anyway, where he was. Why start driving around? You would found a secluded place, right?
And no, he didn't find that was a parking lot right by his apartment.
Yeah, no, I know.
That's where the car was.
Right, exactly. But there was nobody around. I'm just saying, if he was just going to leave the body to be found somewhere in his own car, why not just toss him in the parking lot and go? Then you're running the risk of getting pulled over for something else, somebody, all those other things.
I mean, he literally could have just shot Chris Tucker as soon as he saw him, because apparently there's no one around, and when there's gunshots in L.A., no one comes out wondering what happened.
Right.
I mean, he shoots someone in the parking lot. De Niro will shoot someone later in the parking lot. No commotion. It's barely. No one hears gunshots and goes bananas. It's very strange. I guess. I guess that's the way L.A. was in 1997. You just shoot people and no one cares.
Apparently.
Or just really convenient for your movie.
Yeah.
Lewis at this point is hanging out with a friend of theirs, Simone, who's all dolled up and singing along with the Supreme's Baby Love to him. She gets a call, and it's from Ordell, who's parked outside and asking for Lewis to come out. Simone is played by Hattie Winston,
who I only know from the TV show Homefront, which was a show set in the World War II. These soldiers are returning from war. It was a soap opera. So here was what happened on it, right? She was like, her husband was already dead, but her son was returning from war, and he was facing a lot of discrimination. And he brought back with him a white woman he was married to. He met her in France, and this is quite a commotion in the town. Plus, also another guy also comes back with his French wife, and she's like very aggressive, and she starts screwing other guys in town. It was actually a very interesting show. I enjoyed it.
I believe also at the time she was on TV show Becker, wasn't she? She played like the.
She was on Becker, but I never saw Becker.
With Ted Danson, yeah, and I'm guessing she must have been in a number of the 70s blaxploitation stuff as well. There's got to be an extra reason Tarantino cast somebody in a thing like this. He kind of populated it with some of those. Even, some of those people who had some prominence in the 70s, whether it was in blaxploitation or in kind of the cheesy 1 hour, cop dramas, things like that. So I imagine if we looked at her IMDb Pro, I bet she has some other cool, like Robert Forster, for example, was one of those 70s cop shows, right? He wasn't Beretta. He was...
Oh, no, he wasn't Beretta.
No, but he was another of those. You know how every network had their own...
Yeah. I don't think he was ever the star of anything, but yeah, he's made a number of...
Yeah, no, I think he was, but I could be wrong. But, so anybody I feel like that you're seeing in this movie who was about 50 years old at the time of filming had some stuff going on back in the 70s. And that whole genre, he was doing a tribute to all that stuff. So I know he was populating it with a lot of people, that came right out of it, which was one of the cooler things that he always did, which I liked about it,
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right, but I only know her from one show.
Right.
I never see any movie she was in or anything else.
Right.
Ordell shows Lewis Beaumont's corpse in his trunk. He explains that Beaumont getting arrested made him a risk to his business because he could be made to talk in exchange for leniency. Yeah, he had to die. Finally, the movie can get back to its titular character, Jackie Brown, as she returns from Cabo and walks through the airport lot. She's met by two bastards, Ray Nicolette from the ATF and Mark Dargis from the FBI, I think? Jackie is reluctant to cooperate, but the cops know exactly what she has in her bag and she lets them find it. They take her into custody. Ray Nicolette is played by Michael Keaton, who for the show we've seen in Mr. Mom and Batman.
And of course, he's back as Batman in local theaters and in The Flash, of course. And I also seen him in Beetlejuice,
Yep.
Birdman,
Yep.
Spotlight, Morbus, The Trial of the Chicago 7, Spider-Man Homecoming, The Other Guys, and Out of Sight.
And I've also seen him in Multiplicity. And Mark Dargis is played by Michael Bowen,
who I've seen in Django Unchained, both The Kill Bills, and The Player.
Well, I'll add to Mark Dargis, one of my favorite character actors in that he's a classic that guy and that you don't recognize him from one role to the other. So you see him in this as this clean-cut FBI agent, whatever. In Kill Bill, he was I'm Buck and and I'm here to fuck, right? He was that skeezy guy. And then he was Uncle Jack in Breaking Bad, the head of the fucking biker family at the whole end of it. That's Uncle Jack. That same guy keeps popping up and being totally different, and I love that about him. He's got such great range. But, he's the kind of guy where you just don't even know his name. He's just a really solid character actor for decades. He's awesome.
Yeah.
For a second, I thought he was the bad guy from In the Bedroom.
I'm not familiar with that, but he could have been. I have no idea.
No, that wasn't him. He's thinking of the guy.
I know it's not him, but I thought he was for a second.
I'm just explaining to Kevin. The guy who he's Tom. I forget his real name, but he's Tom Cruise's cousin. That's all I know.
Ah, okay. There's a lot actually in this movie of crossover between this movie and Breaking Bad. Have you noticed a lot of?
You're right. Yeah,
a good number of them.
But it's just pre-Breaking Bad, though, so it's
by
not
a
like
decade. Absolutely, by a decade. And I wonder how much Breaking Bad took from this movie, like thematically and things. Like, for one thing I picked up on this that I hadn't before, but the movie begins, the first images you see are of Jackie Brown moving along that people mover in the airport, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like she is, at the beginning of the movie, just being moved, pushed to her fate. She's being, without, she's going into this whole thing. And then the very last scene of the movie is Jackie Brown driving away. She's got the money and she's driving off to her freedom, which is like the exact same shot as from Breaking Bad or from El Camino with Jesse driving away, and the same. It's a lot of things I was picking up were triggering throughout the movie that Breaking Bad element and world to it, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, you're probably onto something. They probably watched this movie, or for all we know, maybe someone who worked on Jackie Brown also worked.
I'm sure.
Breaking Bad. I mean,
I would be willing to bet that the casting people probably, because when you see so many of them pop up in that, But very cool. Very great. I love this movie.
One of the casting directors was named Jackie Brown.
No kidding.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, that's not why the character is named that,
right.
But
nice coincidence.
They just were.
Yeah.
So they bring her to an interrogation room where she continues to be standoffish. Okay, I was only paying attention once.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did they plant the cocaine, or was it actually in that bag?
Yeah, no. He didn't plant it. It was just a little gift. Because remember, then later Ordell was like, oh, he said he was putting something in. My bad. That was just the dude in Mexico sending Ordell a little...
Okay, because what I remembered was Michael Keaton hunched over with an open desk drawer, messing around in the bag, and I could have sworn I saw him put something in it and then be like, "Oh, look what I found."
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't. I can see why the way it's shot does sort of would probably. Maybe Tarantino wanted to leave it open for interpretation, but like you said, Ordell later says that. Oh yeah, he said he's gonna put something in the bag. So
that could also just be nobody believing Jackie.
Michael Keaton is also such a good actor and stuff. If you watch that scene and you see it's all in his face, but you see it register in his face as he's reaching in and feeling something he wasn't expecting to feel, and then the surprise and stuff. I think that was totally legit, that it was what they said it was.
Okay.
Because they treated her square. They gave her a deal and whatever and didn't do what they said they wouldn't. You know what I mean? They're
more interested in Samuel Jackson's character than they are in her.
Right.
And they were strangely complete bastardish for cops, which is the least believable part of this movie. So the problem here is that the bag held $50,000 in cash that she didn't declare at customs. So from there, she's arrested and booked. And yeah, they find a little baggie of cocaine in there too and call it intent to distribute.
Right.
That was kind of bullshit. But it was for someone else.
Right.
I guess that's distribution. At her arraignment, her bail is set at $10,000, $15,000 less than the prosecution was suggesting, given that her job could make her a flight risk. She's sent back to jail to await trial. Ordell is in the courtroom and hears all of this. So he heads back to Max Cherry's and again uses a bunch of unnecessary words to arrange another $10,000 bail, this time for Jackie. Max reluctantly accepts the case. That night, Max brings a young woman to prison and tells the guard that he's taking one home. Once the paperwork is all processed, Max awaits outside the gate reading a book. Jackie appears walking out of the prison and meet cute music starts playing. Because even from 30 yards away, he is insta-smitten. To be clear, she just got out of jail and looks like she just got out of jail, and he is still insta-smitten.
I noticed that too. I thought the same thing was odd. It was they showed her walking from a distance and in shadow. She wasn't well lit.
Backlit.
Yeah, backlit, and so it was like then they kicked on a little early with the music that is supposed to signify that he's having romantic feelings or something already. It's like, no, that's a shadowy figure who's coming out of jail, and you don't know, he doesn't know how scarred up her face could be. He has no clue. At least let her step into a street light. Let her step into a street light, and then you get Pam Grier.
But we don't know how many other women who've gotten out of prison that he's banged. So for all that, this may be his thing.
I don't know.
It's a good profession to choose if that's your fetish.
Sure. Yeah. If you like them with 3 days of filth because they've been sitting in a jail cell, if that gets you going.
Odiferous. He maintains his professional demeanor and offers her a ride home, which she accepts. The car ride involves a back-and-forth discussion about where she can get some cigarettes, as well as a peek at Chekhov's gun in the glove box. They end up at a bar near Jackie's home. They discuss the complications of drinking and weight management, and Max presents his creds of having written 15,000 bonds over the years, and some preliminary legal strategy if she cooperates with the police.
They knew about the money. They even knew the exact amount.
What did they want to know?
Who gave me the money and who I was giving it to.
Then they have a click moment when she mentions the dead guy who ratted her out, who Max bonded on Monday. Ordell posted her bond too, and that's not good news from her perspective.
This is where she realizes she's in some real trouble, and my takeaway on this scene is how much nostalgia, or I'm not a nostalgic person so much, but how much like I miss the 90s and bars like they were in, like a real wood paneled place that, that the drinks are pretty cheap and it smells of cigarette smoke and it's got, it's just that old school thing. It seems like today, like especially post pandemic, all of those places seem to be gone. And now it's just Uncle McFucky's sports bar and grill.
How often do you leave New York City?
Frequently, as a comedian, as a touring comic over the years, dude, that's one of the things like I've missed about our society. Like I wanted to be a comic to go and see the country, and then it seems like town after town, city after city, it's it's just another chain restaurant and all that kind of stuff. It's those little hole in the wall ones that are going away. That I don't know, like Hemingway said, every man needs a bar that he can call home, and that kind of bar feels homey, and like the way Samuel L. Jackson right away was like, this place, I'm going to come back here. Like I don't know, I miss bars like that.
Alrighty,
I can live with all that except the smoking. I do not miss that.
Right? Yeah,
not a fan.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. I don't miss the cigarettes. I don't miss coming home smelling of smoke and all of that. You're right. But just the ambiance, the decor, all that kind of stuff, I really...
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody looks better in low light.
Absolutely.
Then there's that.
Ordell is already waiting outside, watching from his car as Max drops her off at home. He retrieves his gun from his glove box and goes to visit. He plays at cordiality for a bit before turning off the lights and putting his hands around her neck, implying that she, like Beaumont, ratted him out.
Is that what I think it is?
What do you think it is?
I think it's a gun pressed up against my dick.
Well, you thought right. Now take your hands from around my throat.
That's Chekhov's gun that she swiped from Max's glove box. She searches Ordell, finding his gun. She has him sit on the couch and gives us the first major element of the plot. She's the only person who can get Ordell his money from Cabo, and she's got a plan.
This was an interesting scene, as I recall, because they did the split screen, right, to show kind of in time with her pulling that gun out, the surprise, answering where it came from, as in that same moment you're seeing Robert Forster opening his glove box and seeing the gun is missing, which was something that they did back in the 70s, and it had gone out of style, and then Tarantino brought it back, and then not long after that, you saw it become ubiquitous. Like the TV show 24 constantly did it, and it was, it was something that I bet you a solid 20 years had passed before Tarantino did it, from something they used to do quite frequently. And this is one of those things that brought that back.
Yeah, I'm sure he was very much referencing a movie. I don't know which one it was.
Airport.
Yeah, he's referencing Airport.
Yeah, they used it in Bullet. They used it in a bunch of stuff back then, yeah. Just a cool technique. And it was cool. Then it got overused, and now nobody's using it again. But it was cool for the time.
I mean, if you're showing things that necessarily have to be happening simultaneously, it's really the only honest way to show that.
Yeah.
Later on, we're going to have 3 scenarios going on that are supposed to be happening simultaneously, but we just get timestamps.
Right.
The next morning, Max shows up. He knows she took his gun because during the about to blow Ordell's balls off scene, we saw a split screen of him finding his glove box empty. She returns it, apologizing for taking it without asking. He even offers for her to hold on to it if it makes her feel safe, but she has Ordell's gun now, so she doesn't need it. She fills him in on her being necessary to get Ordell's money out of Cabo and how she does not want to go to jail again.
Yeah, I was kind of kidding before about how maybe he's into women like this, but if you think about it, you're a bail bondsman. Someone is taking your gun, and you just come back the next day like, oh, this is no big deal. He has got to have been doing this before. This cannot be the first time he's had this sort of relationship with someone he got out of jail. It can't be. I just don't believe it.
I think you're right.
In all his years, that was the first time he let one of his clients see that he had a gun in his glove box. No, I'm not buying it.
Right.
Yeah.
There's more hanging out conversation. Max compliments her looks a few times. Jackie is worried about losing her miserable job at Cabo Air because it's better than the other miserable job she's looking at if she loses it. She's tired of starting over, and over, and over. Later, she's talking with Ray and Mark, working out the beginnings of a sting for Ordell. Well, at least as far as they know.
How can you help us?
Oh, hey, I'll do anything I can to help you get his ass. Short of wearing a wire. And in return for my help, I need permission to leave the country on immunity.
You don't want much, do you?
I mean, this is really very, very much what you would get from any book that you would ever read from, now I'm blanking, Rum Punch, from Elmore Leonard. It was almost every one were about one person playing one group off the next, and
Right.
That was the other thing with his books, is they became kind of repetitive because they were all, it was interesting to see how he pulled that trick off each time. But it's just, one group is against the other, and how do they play each other off of it? This is where we get really into the plot of the thing.
At Ordell's, Melanie has a head start on getting high, and Ordell and Lewis come back from a shopping trip. Melanie remarks on Lewis's new duds. Ordell gets a phone call from Jackie, and they arrange a meeting to discuss their plan. Melanie and Lewis pass the bong and discuss the physiologics of smoke inhalation. Ordell heads out and asks Melanie not to tear Lewis's new clothes off of him. So Melanie offers Lewis a Metrix, or a 1995 predecessor of Soylent. He declines. They look at pictures on the wall and talk about Melanie's time living in Japan. It's like 4 minutes of just small talk.
That's Japan.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, it looks, I can tell.
Wanna fuck?
Yeah.
They do that standing up, and it's what I think Swedish singer Tove Lo was describing in Habits when she sang,
By the way, does anyone remember Metrix? Because I didn't. I did not. That reference went right over my head. I'm like,
yeah, I thought that was just the system of measurement that was used like in Europe.
What I missed the reference of a Metrix.
Metrix. She offers him a Metrix.
Apparently, it was a what Soylent is now. Soylent is a what would you call it, George?
Meal replacement shake.
Oh,
It's a meal
right.
replacement.
Okay, yeah. I gotcha. Okay, that was the brand name.
And I just did not remember that at all.
Well, did that exist, or is that like Red Apple cigarettes? Where
No, it existed.
It definitely existed.
Oh, it's real, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's out of business now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that sex scene? Was that disappointing looking or what?
Disappointing for who?
Her. Definitely for her.
I don't think she really expected much. She's high as fuck. She doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was just something to pass the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It passed 3 minutes. They title carded that it passed 3 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, she probably thought it would last a little longer than that.
Which look at them. That's the thing. You got De Niro's character's just been in jail for 4 years, and this is his first time back with a woman. I think that's probably heroic for him. 3 whole minutes to make it.
Well, we don't know what he did with the lady who was singing to him. I assume they were going to bang, so that would have really been his. After he got out of jail, that was first.
Because Ordell came and picked him up. Unless he was crashing.
No, Ordell asked him to come out. He was crashing there. He was staying.
Okay, so he was staying there. So maybe ideally he did go back and hook up with Becker's secretary at the end of that evening first.
Jackie and Ordell meet at that bar near her place, and she tells him what she told the cops. Her plan is to walk a thin line between cooperating with and subverting them, to get Ordell his money from Cabo without the cops tying him to arms dealing or confiscating it. At least, this is all as far as Ordell knows. Ordell doesn't like it, but Jackie is a smooth talker. Mm-hmm. Melanie and Lewis are post-coitally getting high while she trash talks Ordell. She proposes that they screw Ordell out of his $500,000. We don't get Lewis's response.
Oh, I forgot about that scene. That's right. That seems like it was going to go somewhere, and it's completely dropped. Or maybe that's why he didn't trust her.
Well, it's not.
No, it kind of goes to the next scene.
It goes to their part in the entire caper, and right.
Well, I guess what I mean is that we never see his response, so we don't know. Does she think that maybe he's going to go with her? What did he say exactly? I just thought that was going to
turn her down because later Lewis meets Ordell at a bar and asks him about Melanie.
Right.
Ordell says she's not his girlfriend, just she has a friendly vagina.
Right.
He also talks about the other women that he keeps on tap.
I got mail over in Hermosa Beach, and I rent this little place for Simone over in Compton, where you staying. And about 4 blocks away, I got this young 19-year-old country girl named Sharonda. I found her on a bus stop 2 days out of Georgia, barefoot, country as a chicken coop. Took her to my place in Compton, told her it was Hollywood.
Great guy, this guy.
Barefoot country as a chicken coop is my favorite line in the whole movie, I think. Country as a chicken coop makes me laugh so much. Let's give credit where credit is due here. I think that Melanie is smarter than we give her credit for, definitely more manipulative.
Lewis lets on that Melanie is scheming, and Ordell is not surprised. He's not worried. He trusts her to be herself, his pet white surfer girl.
Well, as somebody who's manipulative or whatever, she has, first of all, gotten herself this pad right on the beach, you know what I mean? And all she has to do is hook up with this guy a couple of times and her rent is taken care of and all that. So she's got herself set up, but now she knows he's got all this money coming in and she wants to get her hands on it. So what does she do? Is the first thug who comes through the door, she realizes that she can manipulate him with drugs and with sex, right? She gets him high. And she fucks him.
Well, she thinks that she can manipulate him.
Well, she thinks that's what being a manipulative person is. You think you can do it and you attempt it.
Yeah.
You're right, but she used these things. Like, I think she was plotting it out ahead of time. Like, I'm going to get him stoned, I'm going to lay him, get him a little drunk, and I'm going to convince him to do this, what could be a deadly thing, to cross this dangerous gun dealer so that I can get rich, right? I think it's pretty coy of her.
Mm-hmm. Jackie comes home and checks her messages. Max leaves a long message, the kind where you really want someone to call you back, but you don't really have any reason to give them to do so. And the voice on the answering machine is Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, which is why it didn't sound anything like a frickin' answering machine. Why it sounded like a ridiculous robot from Futurama. Jackie and Ordell meet to go into more detail about the plan. Jackie's told the cops that Ordell never picks up the money himself, so she will do a test run for them to show them how the handoff works, with a small $10,000 sum that the cops don't really care about but will confiscate anyway. The second run will be the biggie, for a full $500,000. This time, Jackie will pass the money off to someone else before the main handoff so that the cops can't get the money. Ordell thinks it's risky, but is on board because otherwise he has $500,000 in Cabo and no way to get it.
My one chip on that plan is, can you just hide a $500,000 in one bag? Like, isn't that a lot? Like when you stack up even $100 bills, does she think she can hide that much and get away with it? Or, right? I mean, how bulging would a bag be filled with a $500,000?
Yeah, I really don't know.
Because what are we talking about? 50,000 bills, right? Is a $500,000?
Yeah.
That's considerable, and all she's got is that one carry-on bag where she thinks she's going to get that money stacked in there, put some shirts on top of it, and the envelope.
Yeah, I don't know. I presume this was checked, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I watched it, I didn't question it. I was like, all right, where the money is. Okay.
Right. That's the fun of cinema. Sometimes you just you don't think about that stuff in the moment, and then later on maybe you ask about it. But
In $100 bills, $500,000 weighs 11 pounds.
Is that all, really?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So that question is now answered.
All right.
Thank you, Internet.
It just, when you think about a lot of money, you think, oh, it must be a lot of dollars, and I guess it doesn't really have to be.
Yeah.
Didn't you, when you were out on the road, did you ever get paid $500,000 and they put it in a bag?
Whenever I'm on the road and they're offering that type of money, it's always you can go get paid in green or white. I just go for the white on that.
Okay.
Max happens to be at the mall to catch a movie and sees Jackie sitting in the food court. She lets him in on the plan and says she thinks the cops want the money for themselves. Max assures her that they want Ordell, and if they cheat, it's to get him. The money is just evidence. Jackie feels Max out, asking if he could walk away with that much money. It's pretty clear that Max would walk on hot coals for a chance to kiss her feet, and Jackie knows it. By the way, earlier, Melanie, we get one of Quentin Tarantino's patented foot fetish shots.
Yes, that's right. That's unnecessary shot of
Very early.
I didn't know that this was a Quentin Tarantino movie when I started watching it.
Oh.
And I saw that shot, and I'm like, is this a fucking Tarantino movie? Lo and behold, yes, it's a Tarantino movie.
Wait a minute. The credits didn't clue you in?
I don't read credits when I'm watching movies.
How do you miss them? They're like right up there on the screen while she's on that people mover.
Yeah, how much interesting stuff happens while she's on that people mover?
Nothing.
Exactly.
You can read.
So I stop watching. I don't look at it. I wait until I see something moving, like worth looking at from the corner of my eye. The money exchange trial run begins with Jackie and the cops in the parking lot as Ray narrates the plan and evidence list into a collar mic. Once Jackie is seated in the food court, Max takes up a position to watch the entire operation. A consultant, if you will. Along comes our last character to introduce, Sharonda, Ordell's southern pet human. She meekly sits with Jackie, who gets up and walks off with Sharonda's bag. Then we flash back to a phone conversation between Jackie and Max, with her telling him that she can't do this without him. Hook, line, and sinker. Sharonda is played by Lisa Gay Hamilton,
who I've seen in Beloved and 12 Monkeys.
Yep, and I've seen her in The Sum of All Fears. I could have sworn that we had seen her in Hustle and Flow.
No.
Yeah, no.
Not her.
It's not her, but I could have sworn. Max watches the cops go after Sharonda. Then Simone, who'd been sitting silently eating at a table next to Sharona and Jackie, gets up, picks up her own identical shopping bag. He follows her to the parking lot, notes her plate number, and says to nobody that...
Could work. She handles the cops, right? Good work.
I guess he's telling that to us, the audience, but those are thoughts. You don't have to have them come out of your mouth.
We've all spoken our thoughts out loud.
If she handles the cops just right, that means if somebody hears that, you're suspect of something now.
George, we've already established that in the L.A. Parking lot, you can shoot somebody.
Right.
Him talking out loud is the least of anyone's concerns.
That's the kind of thing people just talk to themselves a little bit. Yeah, that'll work. That'll fit.
Jackie goes to Melanie's place to yell at Ordell about how Sharonda passed the money to Simone because that damages her standing with the cops. They need to trust her. Which, by the way, why do the cops still trust her?
Right.
Well, as far as I know, she hasn't lied to them, so why wouldn't they trust her?
If they went after Sharonda and Sharonda didn't have the money because Simone had it, why do they still trust Jackie?
Yeah, why did they go through with the plan if the first time it didn't work right?
The trial run failed.
Right.
Well, that's true.
And it's never brought up by the cops.
Yeah, it's true.
The new plan is to have Jackie pass the money to Simone in the dressing room of a department store before heading to the food court for the fake swap with Sharonda. None of that is going to happen. Jackie has dinner with ATF agent Ray, who knows more about the situation than Jackie thought he did. She describes Melanie and tells Ray that they're making one change to the plan, the amount that Ordell is bringing in. That is a lie, so that she can show them $50,000 and keep a full $500,000 out of sight. Later, she runs it past Max, who cautions her that cops are great at not letting on when they know someone is lying. Later, Jackie gets a call from Ordell that Melanie is taking Simone's place, because Simone took his $10,000 and ran off with it.
I wonder why that is there. That seemed unnecessary to the... Unless I'm missing something. Did it advance the plot at all for that to happen?
Yeah, because otherwise there'd be no reason for Melanie to be doing it.
Right.
Okay.
And it also establishes that you can't trust anybody in that world.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, I think Ordell already knew that. That's why he was killing everybody.
Well, right, but anybody can turn on you, even for like if you think that woman is being put up, no different than Sharonda, no different than than any of the others. You know, obviously beyond being an arms dealer, Ordell is a pimp, right? I mean, he's putting all these women up, and he's not doing that just for free. She knows that he knows exactly where she lives. She's taken off with that $10,000. Giving up her home and everything else just to go on the lam for what is not a lot of money.
Right.
So it's kind of establishing these people make some real foolhardy decisions about what seems like a lot of money, and that it ends up, being a big problem for them.
Yeah.
Well, Elmore Leonard was really, really, really pleased with this adaptation of his book.
Right.
Which tells me maybe he's just not a good writer.
I think I said that earlier.
Now it's time for the big event. On the way back from Cabo, in the airplane bathroom, Jackie hides the $500,000 in the bottom of her bag with the $50,000 in an envelope on top. Once she's in the States, Ray marks the bills and tells Jackie that she's officially out of trouble, so don't try anything stupid. And the next section is title carded with timestamps showing when all of these things simultaneously happen. Max heads to the mall. Lewis gets increasingly frustrated and eventually gets Melanie to finish getting ready, and they head to the mall. Ordell heads to a strip club on the other side of town to hide out. In the mall parking lot, Jackie prepares a dummy bag with books in the bottom and a beach towel on top and about $40,000 sandwiched between. She puts the $500,000 in another bag with an identical towel on top. She heads to the department store and asks to try on a power suit. She takes the bags into the changing room with her. Max is in that department store watching. A reluctant Melanie, being handled by an increasingly erratic Lewis, are there too. Max waves at Lewis, and Lewis doesn't clock anything wrong with seeing Ordell's favorite bail bondsman around their criminal plot.
Mm-hmm.
Melanie goes into the dressing room, and Jackie passes her the bag with the books. Melanie leaves, and an even more paranoid and squirrely Lewis berates her and snatches the bag from her. As those two head outside, Jackie emerges from the fitting room and nervously pays the cashier in cash for the suit she's still wearing. She heads over to the food court. Max sees all this and retrieves the bag with the $500,000 from the fitting room. Out in the parking lot, Lewis can't remember where he parked, and Melanie is having a field day pushing his buttons. So he shoots her twice, leaving her dead in the parking lot, and gets in his hippie van and drives off.
Not a soul responds to this.
Nope.
It's Los Angeles. Apparently the parking lot is completely empty and no one responds to gunshots.
At high noon on a Wednesday. Before we get too far away from it, there's one thing I like to note is as De Niro is exiting the mall with Bridget Fonda, he does one of my favorite De Niro moves that he's done in numerous movies, which is the one hand on the back, kind of mumbling, get the fuck, don't you say another thing, you get in that fucking car, and he keeps pushing, right? And just pushing her, right? And it's this thing, and I did this one day with my wife. I was pretending to be like De Niro, right? So we're just on a walk, and I have my hand on the small of her back, and I just start doing the same, like, you get in the fucking car, you don't say another fucking word, you get in the, and doing this thing as I'm pushing. And now to this day, my wife requests it every once in a while because she likes being pushed, like not having to do the walk. So if we start walking up a hill or some shit, she'll be like, yeah, do that De Niro thing. So every time I'm like a little T-bar pushing her up the hill just because I ripped off the little De Niro impression. It's one of my. He does it in like 7 movies. It's his little move. It's one of my favorite De Niroisms.
No, the real gem of this story is you found the perfect partner for you.
I really did. Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. She requested it just yesterday. Had no idea that I was doing this or anything else. But we were out for a walk. She's like, do that De Niro thing. I'm tired. Don't you say another fucking word. You get in your fucking car. You do. I swear to God, I'm gonna fucking. And you just a little push on the back. Yeah. Love De Niro.
And that is Kevin Bartini's marriage, everybody.
Right. That's absolutely right.
Max 2, more calmly and less murdery, drives away with the $500,000. In the food court, Jackie calls for the cops' assistance and tells them that Melanie came into the changing room, knocked her over, and took the bag.
Special shout out also to Melanie, to Bridget Fonda, and her acting, her body language, and how she have possibly come out of that dressing room looking more guilty. The way the speed walk shit beeline, it's like if you watch, honest to God, footage from somebody ripping off a thing and they're trying not to look guilty. She was just perfect, dead on, perfect way she did it. Awesome. Very funny way, and it was really great.
Lewis picks up Ordell and fills him in on the last scenes. Ordell isn't too upset about Lewis shooting his favorite white girl, as long as she's dead. He's not happy about Lewis seeing Max there either. Most of all, Ordell is furious that the bag they have only has $40,000 in it. He shoots Lewis twice, leaving him dead in his hippie van, and walks away. He figures that Jackie and Max screwed him out of his $500,000.
Again, gunshots, broad daylight, nobody noticed. He just walks out, closes the door to the Scooby-Doo mobile, and walks off in no hurry.
Ordell is understandably angry. He calls Max's office, and Winston doesn't appreciate his tone. Later that night, Max calls Ordell back to return his $10,000 bond for Jackie. Wink, wink. Ordell says he wants his money or Jackie is dead, and if she goes to the cops, he's taking her down too. So Max has Winston do what he does best. Find someone who doesn't want to be found. In this case, it's Ordell, so Winston does that. And Max goes to see him, to deliver him the $10,000, and to tell him that Jackie wants to give him his money, but she's scared of him. Ordell puts his gun to Max's back and has him lead the way. In Max's office, in the dark, Jackie makes a phone call and practices drawing a gun, steeling herself for what's coming. Then Max and Ordell show up, and in the dark she can see Ordell's silhouette, armed, so she calls out for Ray, who shoots Ordell dead. The $10,000 were marked bills, and all Ray wanted was Ordell anyway, so he's cool with it. Later, Jackie pays Max a visit to thank him. He kept 10% of the $500,000 and gave the rest to her free and clear. She says she's going to Spain and smooches him. He takes a phone call and she leaves.
I'm someone who worked at an airport for very little money. I guess she's not really an ex. Is she an ex-con technically?
Yep, she is an ex-con.
Oh, so she's an ex-con.
That's why she's working there.
Oh, that's true. You're right. And yet suddenly she's got money to go to Spain. Is no one going to question that?
I guess the better question is just, what's Spain's extradition, right? If she can get out of the country with that money, and go somewhere where they're not going to send her back if she's caught, she's kind of in the free and clear, right?
I mean, this is pre-9/11.
Exactly.
So I guess you could have a bunch of money carrying with you on the plane. I guess, yeah.
Yeah. As long as you claim it with customs, I guess, right? When you go through. Yeah.
Finally, Jackie drives away as another music video for Bobby Womack and James Lewis Johnson's 1973 struggle song, 110th Street. The end.
The end.
All right. Well, I think we already know how you feel about it. But anyway, Kevin, does this picture still work?
Yeah, I think it works great. I think... I love that it's pre-internet, pre-cell phone, so it's one of those movies that's just in its own little time. It was a really nice homage to the blaxploitation films and to the the B list movies of the 70s. I loved every performance. I thought it was, it was a lot of fun. A great movie, start to finish. Would highly recommend to anyone, especially maybe somebody who's not into Tarantino. Maybe as they have their own preset idea of what his movies are, and this movie is kind of not that. It's not the super violent, but you do get some of the good dialogue back and forth and some of his style. So it would be kind of maybe check that one out first and see if it's your taste. And if it is, then we can move you on into something else. Yeah, I think it's really aged really great over the last 20 years since it came out, 25 years. Great movie. Definitely in my top 5 for Tarantino stuff.
Okay, George, what did you think?
It's not my bag as far as movies go, but it was a pretty good movie. I think the most problematic aspect of it, aside from the just flood of N-words, was a black woman weaponizing the police to kill a black man. I think that doesn't necessarily make it not work, especially as an homage to blaxploitation films. I do think it's a interesting plot point, given we are in the, Black Lives Matter era. We are past the Derek Chauvin trial. Like, the idea of weaponizing the police to kill a black man is a problem. And the unrealistic part is that she doesn't get killed by the police either. Because we know what frickin' happens nowadays. Like, it's but again,
well, I mean, even in this
movie,
scenario, I doubt that she herself would have been killed by the police. That would have been weird.
Well, yes, it would have been weird, Joe. It's also weird when it happens in real life.
I'm just saying in this scenario, this wouldn't happen in real life, I'm saying.
Yeah, because she called them, right. But, that's it. It's something that leaves there's a question there. I'm not qualified to answer, but I do think it's something to analyze for people who should be analyzed.
So you're saying you would have been more comfortable had she shot him? Because there's no way Ordell's not dying at the end of the movie.
Definitely would have been comfortable and happier if she had shot him.
It's interesting, that aspect of it, because back in 97, this didn't particularly bother me. Honestly, it didn't bother me today either. But then I know Ordell's the bad guy, and I don't mind him getting shot by anybody. But I don't think what you're saying is wrong, but for sure, maybe some people look at this and go like, really would have preferred the cop not do that. But it's not, I don't know, for myself, it just wasn't enough for me to not like this film. I thought it still worked as a film.
Yeah, and I, to be clear, it's not that I didn't like this film. This film was not a bad film. I have a short attention span. This movie was 2.5 hours long, and I had to write a summary about it. That's where any animosity I have towards this film came from. Otherwise, it was a pretty decent movie. Pam Grier is a delight. I've never seen her in anything else, but she was absolutely delightful in this movie.
And should be said, somebody who really didn't work for 20 years. There are people like the 70s B movie stars and the blaxploitation stars. They didn't work forever, and that was one of the cool things about Tarantino, was he was bringing people's careers back and giving us a new appreciation of people that nobody was going to, unless it was Tarantino, who at the time was the hottest young director that was changing Hollywood. I mean, no one would have put money up for a movie starring Pam Grier and Robert Forster. You know what I mean? With that he was able to get that done. Never mind that you had De Niro in a supporting role and Samuel L. Jackson. But, how do you even get anyone to put that money up? These people hadn't worked in so long. And then Robert Forster ended up having a career for the rest of his life. He was a working actor straight on. So was, Pam Grier's still alive and still appearing in things. So that's such a cool thing, too, is what he did with that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that reminds me, if anybody wants to find out more about Pam Grier, they really should watch or listen to the podcast from TCM on Pam Grier. It's excellent. But yeah, she wasn't even so much she was even the top blaxploitation star of the 70s. She was a top action star of the 70s. Her films are just top box office. Mm-hmm. And it's just weird. And suddenly the 70s ended, and then bam, so did her career. Yeah. It's just one of those things, like, her films are still making money, but for some reason, we're past this now. We want to focus on something else. And Star Wars comes out, and we just want sci-fi now. And that was it.
Yeah, and the stories, especially like with black women from that time, like one of my favorites is like Betty LaVette, who is a singer, or Darlene Love, who were a lot of those singers from the 60s that were doing great stuff with the Wall of Sound, with all that kind of shit, that their careers just ended and nothing happened. Like Betty LaVette was this beautiful singer who ended up, and Darlene Love too. There was a time where they were chambermaids again at motels to make ends meet. Wow. And then Betty LaVette ended up singing at Obama's inauguration. You know what I mean? Like, Darlene Love ended up getting a career back, and a lot of them are now touring and doing stuff. So it was the actresses, it was the musicians. They really had a rough go of it. And like the movie stars of the day, the white movie stars of the day that were in Pam Grier's time, they were in the 80s were still able to make a living getting into television and other things and had other avenues that were more for them, where a lot of people like Pam Grier didn't have that. And so, I just love that about Tarantino, that he was able to bring people like that back and give them another shot, and that they were able to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about how he brought back what's his name, John Travolta.
That's right, yeah.
But John Travolta had really only had like 5 or 6 years where he hadn't had a big hit. You know what I mean? He wasn't completely.
No, I think with the time Tarantino got him, his career was pretty dead. I can't remember the name of the film, but his last film completely bombed.
Yeah.
In fact, he's back to doing his bombing films, but it was bad.
Yeah.
It was just really bad.
I mean, he was doing those Talking Baby movies and some other stuff like that, and had fallen.
That did do well. That
they were doing some money and stuff, but he was still getting work. Yes, he wasn't producing like an A-list movie star anymore temporarily, but he was still getting work.
Yeah.
He still owned a jet. He wasn't a chambermaid for a while. You know what I mean? He just had a little dip.
Yeah.
I mean, Tarantino changed some people's lives with some movies like this and some casting like this. He changed people's lives, got them back into a career. It's wonderful.
So, Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I think the film still works. Yeah, I think it's a film that we can still watch today. The caveats you put in, I think, are very good. I like I said, I wasn't as bothered by the N-words. I don't mind it coming out of the black characters' mouths. I don't need the white director telling his black actor who's hired to use that word. I'm sorry, just did not care for that. But it doesn't happen in this film, so I'm okay with it. And I like Tarantino's movies. If I knew him as a person, I'd probably punch him in his fucking face. But as a director, I like his work.
Alrighty. So this works.
Oh, yeah.
Right on.
According to us.
So, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Plug some shit.
Well, you guys can find me at kevinbartini.com. Bartini spelled like the cocktail, but with a B. Follow me on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm going to be out doing more spots here in New York City and heading back out on the road probably later this summer. And, kevinbartini.com is the one-stop shop where you'll be able to find everything.
All right. That'll be in the show notes.
Beautiful.
Cool.
So y'all can click on it. And Kevin, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Kevin, thank you very much for doing our show.
Pleasure.
Yep.
Man. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, George, what's up next?
Next week, we will be talking about Labyrinth from 1986, as per the request of our newest patron, Cheryl.
Now, I've never seen this film. Have you?
This morning. You're going to hate it.
Okay. Before this, have you never seen it before?
I'd seen parts of it before.
That's the one with David Bowie and the Muppets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not the
think
Muppets. Not Muppets that you would recognize.
Right. More Jim Henson characters, not Porky, not the...
Well,
Miss
yeah,
Piggy
he was
and...
the director. Jim Henson directed it.
Right.
And Frank Oz did a lot of the puppet work.
Sure.
Frank Oz was the guy that animated Yoda in the original trilogy.
So you think I'm going to hate it, though?
I think you're going to hate it for good reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Can't wait to see it.
Frank Oz is also the guy at the very beginning of the Blues Brothers that gives Juliet Jake back all of his belongings. You know, the one prophylactic, one soil. Right. That's Frank Oz as well.
Yep.
That's right. And we
mentioned that on our episode.
Ah.
Yeah, and we liked it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very good show. Good movie.
Great movie.
The show was good, and the movie was good.
Great movie. Yeah.
All right, let me wrap this up. So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romacka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be at the spot.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romacka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
Anything?
Oh, that was the end of the clip.
Were we supposed to say something?
Yeah.
Did either of you know that back in 1965 was the first time we had professional paramedics?
Gentlemen, what is the favorite room in your house?
Would you go to prison for a president?
So, gentlemen, what is the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
What fictional character scared you as a child?
What item do you hope will be obsolete in 20 years?
Can you explain to me why children's entertainment can show male and females kissing, but same-sex kissing is out? What's the logic to this?